and just not fitting in. And what people don't realize is that like bullying is not one incident. It's a series of ongoing incidences. It's, you know, someone graffitiing your locker, it's someone writing you a note, it's someone tagging you in the wrong picture on Facebook, you know, calling you something on the hallways. And it's this daily grind of just being devalued and disrespected that really gets to you. And I think the worst part is that everyone thinks it's a joke, everyone thinks it's kind of funny, but the truth is it just eats you up inside.
Tell me a little bit about what you went through in high school. It was in Sault Ste. Marie that you were going to high school, and you went through a rough time, and it ended up actually becoming a bit of a legal challenge, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was bullied and discriminated against in high school. I was the only openly gay kid in my school, and it was this daily grind of just being teased and made fun of. And, you know, I was beat up a few times. My teachers in my school never really did anything to solve it. And so as a result, I sued my high school and my school board, and I won a legal challenge, and I used the mice to found Jared's Vision. And today our team goes to schools in, you know, communities like Ottawa, and we do work in schools to stop bullying and stop discrimination. And it's really amazing, because what we do that's slightly different is we work with the bullies, we work with the stray kids. And actually, I was at a school today, and, you know, it was amazing how excited the teachers were, you know, even at the elementary level, to open the door to talk about bullying in a different way.
So we'll talk in a moment about what Jared's Vision does specifically.
Yeah.
But in terms of your own experience, what was it like for you being the only openly gay person in your school, like Jamie Hubley apparently was? What did you go through on a daily basis?
I mean, really on a daily basis, it was that just sort of bullying grind. It was this sort of, for me, it felt like drama. It felt like a joke to everyone else, or just, you know, something unnoticeable. I think the majority of people I went to high school with weren't really actually homophobic. They were just homo unaware. They just didn't understand what it was like to be called a fag or be called gay, you know, over and over again by different people. It was a daily basis thing. It was a cultural, strategic thing. And then the worst part is you'd go to class and you'd learn about Arthur Miller or Picasso or Tchaikovsky, but your teachers would never mention that they're gay. You'd learn about the Holocaust and you'd study how other communities suffered, but they'd never mention homosexuals or lesbians. And it sucks. It sucks to be never represented in your curriculum. It sucks to never be represented in TV shows and movies. And even when you are represented, you're a caricature or a stereotype. And you can't talk to your parents about it because they're straight, and you can't talk to your teachers about it because none of them ever come out of the closet. And you're never represented in the curriculum or in the media, and you feel like the only one.
And what impact did that have on you? Did you were you desperate at times? Were you depressed? How did it impact you?
You know, I remember there were some nights where, you know, I just sit down and call Kids Help Phone, because like I was up in Northern Ontario and we didn't have any counseling services, and I didn't feel like there was anyone I could talk to, and it was tough. It was heartbreaking. And I don't know, I think, you know, one of my friends asked me, you know, what the difference between, you know, me and other kids are, and I just think I'm really lucky, you know, that I got through it. But I don't think we as a community can rely on luck anymore. I think that we as a community have to look at ourselves, because the truth is gay kids are expected to solve these problems, and we expect that people like me start gay straight alliances or start clubs, but the truth is we need straight people to make a difference, and we need straight people to support LGBTQ allied youth initiatives that'll make a difference.
And some of those issues have been in the news even before what happened with Jamie Hubley. So we'll talk about those coming up in a few minutes. But you told your story, and I think a lot of people, before we heard about Jamie Hubley, if you told that story a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people would have said things are different now in schools. Bullying's not tolerated. They never let anybody get away with that now. It's different from when you were in school. But is that the case?
You know, I was in a school today, and it totally isn't. I mean, kids on a daily basis report feeling isolated. LGBTQ kids report hearing bullying every day, if not multiple times a day. And I think, you know, the daily grind hasn't changed because the culture that we live in hasn't changed. You know, gay and lesbian people can have all the rights in the world, but unless the culture and the community they live in is respectful, unless they feel represented in media, on TV, in movies, and not just as caricatures or stereotypes, you know, until we can see our politicians feel comfortable come out, until a teacher can come out in an elementary school and not be judged by parents or discriminated against by students or made fun of. I think we have a long way to go, and I think that's what we're facing.
Joanne, let's get you into the discussion here. To what extent do you think things have changed in schools? Because as I said, I think the perception among a lot of people is that bullying just isn't tolerated anymore, when obviously it still does go on.
I think certainly at the Youth Services Bureau we see 3,000 kids a month, and we would hear many stories about kids who were coming to us because they're feeling anxious, they're experiencing depression because they've been bullied. But we'd also see some kids who have been bullies themselves, and I think the unique piece that JARE brings is the idea that focusing on those bullies and wanting to change that fundamentally. That change isn't going to happen overnight, and I think we all recognize that. I think it's the idea of creating a fundamental shift, and I think the first step of that is the intention to do so, and I think that intention is even welcoming groups such as, people such as JARE, and a number of different initiatives throughout the schools have occurred to actually try and shift with the best of intentions. But, are we there yet? No. And are we on our way? Absolutely.
Ruth, some people would say, okay, we can address bullying, we can confront it, we can try and treat the root causes, we can work with the bullies themselves, we can also have a zero tolerance policy for bullying, but kids are always going to be kids, and there's always going to be bullying. There's always going to be marginalizing some kids, there's always going to be insecurities playing out in certain kinds of behavior. Is that true? Or can it be completely eradicated?
Well, can it be completely eradicated? I don't have an answer for that one. I wish there was a magic bullet or something you could buy on eBay that would look after that one. I think there are a couple of things. If I believe that it can't be eradicated, if I believe that this is just the way things are, kids will be kids, boys will be boys, and that kind of thing, then that's a limiting belief that says, well, too bad, so sad, can't do anything about it. I don't buy that. I think to a large degree, there are a lot of things societally that used to be acceptable that are no longer acceptable. We didn't used to talk about child abuse. We didn't used to talk about domestic abuse. If you were being abused or bullied or whatever, when I was a kid, and I was bullied to the point where I can remember seriously questioning whether or not there was any point in going on, people used to write things about me on the sidewalk in black paint. You can't get that off. And I'm sure if I went back to that town and I looked on the sidewalks, there are probably still signs of what used to be written outside my house I had to look at every day when I went out the house, no matter where I was going. If we believe that that's okay, and if we believe there's nothing we can do about it, then we're done before we even start. We have changed so many things societally, and we have the power to change this, but it's not going to change overnight, and it's not something that we can do with a shotgun approach, where you fire off both barrels and you hope something sticks. This is going to take a concerted effort on the parts of schools. Schools have an obligation to provide a safe environment for kids in the same way that workplaces have an obligation to provide a harassment-free workplace for employees. The same obligation exists for schools. Do we do well at it? Well, policies are there, but policies are not enough. It's also about compliance and engagement with the policy. So when you look at how people engage with policy, so a zero tolerance policy, isn't that a great thing? But if I only buy into the zero tolerance policy when I think the principal's looking out the window watching what's going on in the playground, I haven't bought into it. I've only bought into it because there's a risk-benefit or cost-risk analysis that I'm doing that says if I get caught, I'm going to be in trouble. So we're right at the lower end of the continuum. If I'm fully engaged in this, I am going to integrate it into everything that I do. I will, in my classroom as a teacher, be talking about respectful interactions. I'm going to help kids learn not just that it's okay to help other kids, but that it's expected to help other kids. Absolutely. That they have the skills to know how to do it. So not just that they know that they need to do it, but they know how to do it. And even beyond that, they're willing to do it. Because, in the same way if somebody gets hurt on the side of the road, look at the incident with the small child in
China?
China, where people walk by. You have to actually be willing to stop and help. So in that sense, there's a huge power in being a witness, the third side, the person who just stands there and says, why are you doing this? To somebody where it's going on. It changes the dynamic. So we need a collaborative partnership between schools, parents, communities, and kids to say, we don't want this anymore. This is not the way we want to be. And we're willing to take the time and the effort to make it change.
And you know, that concept of engagement is key. It absolutely, and engaging, creating opportunities even for kids in schools to engage in activities that actually promote a more positive environment, a more welcoming environment. All of those kinds of strategies create a shift in the landscape, if you will, that make it more acceptable or more desirable to be part of something that's more positive than as opposed to part of something that you're not feeling great about.
Jared, let's get your thoughts on this. This issue of all, you know, a certain level of this, not all of it, but some of it is just kids being kids.
Well, I think they're right. I mean, I think, there is change and it is possible. One of the schools we've been working with in the Ottawa Valley used to be the most homophobic place that I went into. I remember going there 3 years ago for our very first consultation. It was our very first school to sign up to Jared's Vision and, engage with our programming, and we were nervous and they were nervous. And as we're walking to the principal's office, this kid looks at me and it's like, faggot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm here to address. And, 3 days later, we did an assembly. Oh no, one of the students.
One of the students said
Sorry,
that. Okay.
yeah, no, oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Okay.
No, one of the students looked at that.
Right.
And yeah, he said something really offensive. Anyway, long story short is, a few days later we had an assembly. A few weeks later we started classroom workshops. And every year since then we come in and we do workshops in history class to talk about LGBTQ cultures and communities. We go in their gym classes and we talk about like safer relationships and LGBTQ people. And, we come in sporadically and help out their diversity club. And it's so amazing. Last year, 2 students graduated, and they were an openly gay couple, and they went to prom together. And as part of their graduation, this football team and a couple of people who had teased them 3 years before we started doing our work in the school gave them an apology card. And it was one of those moments you can't even make on TV or in a movie. But the truth is, Ruth and Joanne are totally right. I mean, it can change. Schools can be really welcoming places where people feel comfortable no matter who they are.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be joined by another guest, Stuntman Stu of the Magic 100 Morning Show, who has started a campaign to help stamp out bullying in schools. We'll be right back on Talk Ottawa. Welcome back to Talk Ottawa. We're talking tonight about bullying, particularly in the school environment, in the aftermath of the suicide of Jamie Hubley, the 15-year-old teenager and son of City Councillor Alan Hubley. The community's response to that has been very strong. And one member of the community who has taken a really strong initiative on this issue is Stuntman Stu from the Magic 100 Morning Show. He joins us on the line tonight. Hi, Stu.
Hi, Mark.
What made you decide to get involved in this issue?
Well, there was a story that you may recall at the beginning of the school year that involved some bullying and hazing of a grade 9 student at a local high school. And I remember being really frustrated by it because it struck a nerve with me as somebody who was bullied in high school. And I tweeted out of frustration that day after we covered it on the Magic Morning Show. And I just said, enough is enough. If I have to go out to every single high school and make this my mission and preach that, no more bullies, it's enough. I'm going to do that. And then I went off to my afternoon nap, and as I learned that on Twitter, you have to be careful what you say because people call you out on it. And when I awoke from the nap, there was a whole bunch of retweets that said, that's a great idea, you should do that. So the next day I went into work and said, let's do this. And within a couple of days, we started to talk more about it. And the conversation on Twitter, we use the hashtag all the time of no more bullies. We started a Facebook page. And as recently as last Thursday, I wrote the words "no more bullies" on my hand, and I held it up to the camera. I took a picture and I posted it. And we've asked people to do that. And just this evening, we had the mayor do it. We've had Liz Manley, Chris Nyland, former Montreal Canadian. But more importantly, we've had just normal folks who want to be a part of it and have joined forces for this No More Bullies fan page. And this is not just, okay, this is the cause of the week for Magic, and then they're going to move on to something else. This is something that struck home For me, as somebody who was bullied in high school, I mean, I never fit into any particular mold or any particular group. I wasn't part of the jocks. I wasn't part of the, a specific club. I was always sort of in the middle, and I got picked on. And there were some moments in high school where I wasn't to the point of, what we're hearing about in the news, but I was at the point where I didn't want to go to school anymore. I was scared to walk down certain hallways because, when you go to school, you're not going to school to get beat up. And, if you tell a teacher, this is 25 years ago, the teacher would say, oh, don't worry about him, just walk down a different hallway. And that was the attitude. And if you went higher than a teacher, and if it got back to the bully, the beating was only going to be double as worse.
How old were you when this was going on, Stu?
This happened when I was grade 8, grade 9, so I was 13, 14 years old, and this continued right through until midway through grade 10 when I had finally had enough. And then after gym class one day, I just, we were playing dodgeball, and I was just getting beamed in the head by these guys. And I turned to our gym teacher, and I was like, are you going to do something? And he laughed it off and said, be a man. And I remember going into the locker room afterwards, and I felt miserable. And one of the bullies said to me, like, I was almost near the point of tears. And he said to me, what are you crying for, you baby? And I don't know where I found it in me, but I charged right towards him, and I pushed him as hard as I could into the lockers, and everybody sort of just stopped, and, in the guy's locker room and said, are you crazy? But I stood up to the bully, and I had my lunch fed to me, that day, but the bully left me alone after that, but it's always bothered me my whole life. Like, it shouldn't get to that point. It shouldn't even get to the point where you have to stand up to the bully. It should be stopped before it even gets into school. And what we're sort of hoping with the No More Bullies campaign on Magic is that we get into schools, we have some very passionate speakers, including City Councillor Alan Hubley, who will be joining us. And, this is something that we hope by engaging students in the conversation that it's going to get to a point that it's uncool to be a bully, that the bully that thinks is going to have to think twice, before pushing somebody down the stairs or before doing something as innocent as knocking out somebody's binders or iPad or whatever they're walking around with in school. They're going to think twice. And those that have been critical of the No More Bullies campaign have said this is going to take you years, and if that's what it takes, then that's what I've signed up for, because not only am I somebody who was bullied, who lived it, but I also am a father with 2 young children, and I don't want them to experience that.
What exactly happens when you go into the schools? Tell me a little bit about what the campaign involves.
The campaign starts on Tuesday, November 15th. We have about a half-hour, 40-minute presentation. We have several speakers. We have YouthNet, which is part of CHIO, that's going to come in and add some real numbers to it. But they're not going to stand up there with a PowerPoint presentation. They know exactly how to talk to students. There's a YouTube video that's going around, Scott Haggart, called I Support You. He put it out last week. It's about a 9-minute video, and he talks about his experiences and would it have been different for him in high school had he come out, where he wasn't the stereotype of what people thought was the stereotype, and it's raw, it's emotion, it's 9 minutes, and he's going to come out and speak in front of the students. And with that, with Councillor Hubley, who is going to come along for the tour, I mean, that's he's speaking from the heart, and unfortunately, what happened to him should never happen again. I mean, we don't want another Jamie Hubley. We don't want another Darren Richardson in Ottawa. It has to end. It has to end with Jamie Hubley. Acceptance, is key, and no more bullies. I mean, we have to drive that point home that, when you do this to somebody, there are repercussions. And while I never wanted to take my own life, I'll tell you, as a 14-year-old, there were moments where I thought, maybe if I pushed, if I did something bad to the bully, if the bully's life ended, well, that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, you shouldn't be thinking these thoughts at 14. You should never think these thoughts.
So this is going to get underway in November. In the meantime, though, as you've been planning this and you've been talking about it, I imagine you've heard from a lot of different people and probably heard some pretty compelling stories about what's actually been happening in our schools.
Mark, the amount of emails that we've received at Magic has just been it's been mind-boggling. It's emails from parents who are sharing their stories, and I mean, half the time you know, I learned a lesson last week. You don't read any of those emails before you go on the radio, because you're just going to be in tears. We've heard from teachers, from some teachers who are frustrated by the system. We've heard from some school officials that, you know, they're looking for answers. They're looking for help. And I'm going to be talking to a bunch of principals next week when they gather for an event next Thursday. And we're going to do a Q&A with the principals before we walk into their schools, because they have questions. So, you know, right now it's just a lot of people, and I mean, there are people that have been affected by bullying, but so many people have come out of the woodwork and just said, I was bullied, and here's what happened to me. And we're hearing stories of, you know, kids that are in, you know, senior kindergarten that are experiencing bullying. I mean, that, you know, my son's 5.5, and I can't, that scares me as a parent, that, you know, we send our kids to school so that they can learn about life, and again, those that have been critical of No More Bullies have said, you know, well, your children should learn to stand up and deal with it. It's adversity. No, that's not adversity. Getting beat up at school is not adversity. No student, no child should ever have to deal with that. They should learn with, you know, they got a D- on something and they want to get an A+. You know, getting beat up.
But there are some people who will say that,
I know.
and who will say what you did was the way to respond to a bully is fight back, stand up to them. That's a message you hear when this is debated.
I understand that, Mark, and that's something that I don't think will ever change. There are always people who are going to want to stand up to that bully. I mean, we're not only hearing from parents, we're hearing from people whose children are long gone from high school and they're in university or they've started their life, and these are people who have, you know, worked in the public sector for 30 years, and they're sharing their stories about being bullied at work. So that's another part that we're hearing. And, you know, we've opened up a can of worms with just so many heartfelt stories that I guess I was a little naive, because I thought that it's a little problem. I never anticipated, or I don't think any of us at Magic ever anticipated, that it's this big of an issue and that it affects so many people. I mean, I thought, and I'm not by any stretch pointing any blame in the school system, but as I wrote on my Facebook page last week, I would think that bullying has to be at the top of that list. And, you know, I've had a number, and again, I put that out there, and I had school officials write to me, you know, asking to be anonymous and saying, you know, there are huge issues in school, and yes, bullying is important, but we have other issues that unfortunately are higher than this. And that's the part that I can't wrap my head around. How can there be an issue bigger than a kid getting beat up, or a kid, you know, and who's not getting beat up at school, but he's getting beat up at the bus? And if he's not getting beat up at the bus, he or she's, you know, getting beat up, you know, off school property, you know, because they go off and they get a bite to eat on their lunch hour. It's a mentality that starts in the home, and I believe there's a responsibility on 3 areas. There's a responsibility on the parents, there's a responsibility on the individual, and there's a responsibility on the schools. And all 3 of those have to take some responsibility. I mean, I tell my kids every day, you know, even when my kids, you know, they're 5 and 3 and they're playing with each other, and my son pushes my daughter because he's older, and I explain to him that you don't do that, because if he thinks it's okay to do it here, then he does it in the schoolyard, and then he doesn't understand, you know, that there's no repercussions. There are repercussions. You cannot do that to another human being.
How often do you think kids are going to need to hear this message? Because obviously you can't just go into a school once and fix everything in one presentation, and I know you know that. But is this going to have to be something that we keep telling kids over and over again?
Mark, we teach kids not to drink and drive. We teach kids not to do drugs. And you know, when I was in high school, those are the 2 key messages. And that was in front of us everywhere. The teachers told us about it. There were posters around school. There were ad campaigns. And what I'm hoping with this No More Bullies is it becomes a much bigger thing, and we just keep telling kids every single day, to the point where they're just wired that way, that they don't even think twice. That, you know, if it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. But it has to. You know, it's great that we're talking about it, but it's great that we're also going into schools, and it's a responsibility on everybody, not just on us at Magic, but on teachers, on parents, and on other students. And you talked about it earlier in your show about, you know, you can't be standing there and watch somebody else getting beat up, because you're not helping the situation. You can't just be standing there, because you see, all you have to do is just get on YouTube and you'll see it. you know, everybody's got a phone now that can record video and upload it to YouTube. Well, no, put down the phone and stop recording somebody getting beat up and do something about it. You know, don't be the one that's standing, don't be the person who's standing there watching the show, you know, because you got a front row seat to some bully beating up, you know, the smaller guy because he said he was going to beat him up after school. You know, you have to take a stand. And people are afraid, and we have to make people understand that don't be afraid. You know, tell somebody, and that's what we hope to accomplish. I mean, it's a you know, you know just as well as I do. Your guests know that it's such a massive issue, but if you just sit back, and as some people have said, oh, you know, you're not going to change it overnight. We're not trying to change it overnight, but we're trying to get it to a point that we never have another Jamie Hubley ever again.
And if people want to contact you about this or speak to you about having this presentation in their school, how can they do that?
The best way is just to go to the No More Bullies page on Facebook. You can't miss it, or you just go to magic100.fm, and then they can email us. And what we're doing is, again, because we have had so many requests for schools and from parents wanting our No More Bullies campaign to come into their school, right now we're trying to accommodate as many as we can. But because this, again, it's much bigger than any of us anticipated. You know, it's going to start somewhere. It's going to start on Tuesday, November 15th, and it's going to continue to grow. And you know, as I tweeted that day, if we have to go into every single school and preach this message, we will. It's just going to take some time, but we will get there. No More Bullies will get there.
All right, Stu, thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Stuntman Stu from the Magic 100 Morning Show and his No More Bullies campaign. And let's get some quick reaction from all of you on that. Jeremy, first to you.
I don't know. I guess, I mean, it's tough, right? Because I was in school a few years ago, and I don't know. I work in schools now, and no kids ever call it bullying. It's really funny. The language that the media uses and the language that adults use is really weird. Nobody calls it bullying. It's drama. You know what I mean? And it's not one person beating you up. It's not one person shoving, you know, someone in a schoolyard and YouTubing it. It's this daily grind of this culture of being discriminated against. At least in my opinion, anyway, in my experience, anyway. You know, the reality is in Ottawa schools, we don't have the violence rates they do in Detroit or in the United States, in upstate New York, for example, where we go. But what Jared's Vision is finding that like bullying is today is it's not necessarily physical. It's verbal, it's subtle, it's backhanded, and it's different than it was maybe when, you know, Mr. Stuntman Stu was a kid. I think it's really awesome, though, that people are taking this issue seriously. And I'm so excited that people are finally talking about it. I know Jared's Vision when we first started, and even, you know, a few months ago, as an organization that's youth-run, you know, we constantly ask adults for help, and we ask, you know, the media to cover our story. We ask people to sort of pay attention to us. And it's tough. It's really tough. No one's really paid attention to this issue. And so it's exciting that people are caring and are getting on board and are doing stuff. But I think as a community, we need to really look at, well, what is the problem, you know, and what is the reaction that people are having to it. And I think presentations are great, talking about it is great, but allowing youth to talk about it is so important. Allowing youth to create their own dialogue and their own space is so important. And I think, like, you know, if we're gonna do something about this, it has to be collaborative. It can't just be a new assembly. It can't just be a new workshop. It has to be, you know, a principal or a kindergarten teacher opening up a book about Sally having 2 moms, so that those kids grow up with a respect for LGBTQ families, so that when and if a student comes out in that class, they grew up with that respect and that tolerance, because that's where homophobia or transphobia comes from, is a disrespect towards a group of people. And same with racism, sexism, any form of discrimination or ableism, or even just general disrespect. So I think, I mean, the community has a role to play, the parents definitely, the schools definitely, but I also think that we as a community also need to look to establish programs that are doing amazing work in our community. You know, YSB, CHEO, Jared's Vision, you know, there's so many, you know, the Centertown Community Health Centers, or the Center Health Community Health Centers across the city. There are so many people already doing good work, and we don't have to always reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to be reactionary either. we need to be collaborative and we need to be constructive and we need to work together. And we also need to talk about homophobia very explicitly, because one of the things I've noticed is people are talking about bullying, but this was a very clearly homophobic incident. And we need to talk about discrimination against LGBTQ people.
Okay, we have to take a quick break. We'll come back with more on Talk Ottawa. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Ottawa. We're talking tonight about bullying, and we welcome your phone calls on the topic. If you have a question or comment, give us a call right now at 613-728-1001. Let's take a call from Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Sort of flipping through the channels, and I saw your show about bullying. I was in the position that Jamie Hubley was in 25 years ago when I was going to high school. And, you know, I really thought that the only way out was suicide. And it saddens me to see how little has changed in the 25 years. I know that Stuntman Stu was talking about, you know, people being beaten up and his anti-bullying crusade, and I think that's a really good idea. But it's not just being beaten up, it's being screamed at across the hallway, like the 3-letter F word that every gay man knows. It's being told, you know, you're not welcome, you're not here, you're not a friend, just go away, you effing F. And it's amazing how upset I am even now. I think that the problem is that it's not just the school. Like, there's so much concentration on the school. And it's important, but it's not just the school. It's the parents. The parents need to tell their kids, they need to show their kids that, look, this is not civilized behavior. This is not acceptable. You have to stop. And that is the harder part. Because, I mean, we can tell kids till we're blue in the face that, no, you shouldn't be doing this. But if they then go home and hear their parents talking about, you know, gay people or black people or women or whatever in those terms, they're going to come back and say that. Like, it's not just school, it's a societal thing, and the parents need to step in.
Okay, Peter, thank you for your call.
Okay.
And let's address that point. And Ruth, maybe you can jump in here, because I think a big question that people have, it's one thing to go into schools and say, you shouldn't do this, it's wrong, there are consequences, there are punishments, you're hurting other people. But don't we have to get at the root cause of why it's starting in the first place? And what is that? How much do we know about that?
Well, here's the Reader's Digest version of what I've done from the work I've done over the years, and from being a parent and from being a kid too. Kids learn what they live. And I agree with Peter totally on that sense. Kid goes home and they're dealt with by their parents in school, they're dealt with by their teachers and so on. If as adults we are modeling in any way, shape or form that it is okay to put down somebody else. As a teacher, I make a comment to you as the student, Mark, you can do better than that. What are you doing slacking off in class? And I do that in front of 25 other kids. What do you feel like? And so we send a message that says it's okay to pick on somebody else in front of others. And so I think one of the key things is people need skills. They need to know how to do something different. You can't just say, don't do this anymore, without replacing it with alternatives. And so there needs to be skill building for the kids, but more importantly, I believe there needs to be skill building for teachers to give them other strategies for dealing with stuff. People need to understand the messages that they're sending, and parents need the same level of skill, because between teachers and parents, they're the ones who are most influential in young kids' lives. And as a parent, when I was raising my kids, a few things I would love to be able to go back and redo, because, you know, you look back, 20/20 hindsight being a wonderful thing, and you wish you'd done things a little bit differently. But we have an important role to play, and we model.
You're talking about changing the way classrooms operate. You're talking about the way a lot of teachers interact with kids. You're talking about the way a lot of parents interact with kids, and you're saying we got to revolutionize all of that.
We need to become more aware of what message we are sending. If I brush past somebody who's walking with a cane and push my way through the door ahead of them, what am I saying to anybody who watches? Somebody with a disability can't necessarily go so fast, that's okay. We need to become conscious at all levels of what message are we sending to our children, and what are we saying that it's okay? In other words, what behavior are we rewarding, and what are we demonstrating through our own actions? Because a lot of it is not spoken. Nobody sits down and says, okay, let's have a lesson today on how to be courteous. We demonstrate courtesy. We don't have lessons around you know, how to be a constructive citizen or how to be a good, we just demonstrate it. And if my kids see me stealing something from the grocery store and not going back and reporting it, or they see me doing something, then I'm saying to them, even if I don't, and actions speak way louder than words, that's okay. And I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think one of the other things that is equally important is for those kids who are, you know, there's two sides to this. We know very well that kids who are bullying are kids that are suffering as well. So there is something going on. There's a motivator for them. There's a reason they're getting something out of that, and it could be everything from stress that's happening at home, a poor modeling that's happening at home. It could be that they themselves are being bullied, and if we don't take the time to figure out what's happening with those kids, then we'll never get to the root of the problem. Equally, for those kids who are being bullied, you know, we need to find ways, whether it's at school, whether it's home, it's after school clubs, you know, trying to find things that engage them into being part of a school or an environment where they feel safe.
So, Jeremy, your program, you said before, it actually focuses on the bullies. Part of this initiative focuses on the bullies. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, what we do is we go in and we share our stories as like gay and lesbian people, bisexual, trans, and queer, and we don't just only speak about bullying. We speak about why you shouldn't bully and how you can be respectful. I think the reality is, you know, when it comes to homophobia and transphobia, the majority of people who engage in that sort of bullying don't even realize it. They don't even realize that, you know, comments like, that's so gay, you suck, and you're such a fag, have an impact, right? And, you know, those are offhanded remarks for some people, but when you hear that on a daily basis from different people in different ways, it hurts so much, and it eats up at your, like, at the core of your being. So what we do is we go in and we share stories, and we don't just share our experience of being bullied, we also share experience of coming out. We share experience of, you know, why we feel we were born gay, and like what happened, and you know, what are the challenges we've overcome, but also who are we as people. And when you share stories like that, kids grow empathy and understanding. In the same way that we address anti-Semitism by sharing, you know, experiences about the Holocaust and the struggles of Jewish Canadians when they first came to Canada. You know, our country had a policy of no Jewish people during the Holocaust. We were very anti-Semitic as a country, and yet by sharing that experience, we learn about our, you know, failures, but we also learn about our opportunities on how we can be nicer to different communities. You know, and that's how that's how you instill empathy in youth. And it's not just quote unquote bullies. It's the school culture in the community. Anyone can do negative things, even, you know, gay and lesbian people who do face bullying on a regular basis. But it's about creating a culture of respect, and you do that by creating a space where people can share what's going on to teachers, administrators, know that what they share will be dealt with appropriately, and then, of course, have positive role models that create and instill a culture of respect.
All right, let's take a call from Richard. Hello, Richard.
How you doing, Rick?
Hi.
I heard that person talk on the 100 Magic, and I was reliving things in my early age, around the 60s and the 50s, early 70s. And I'll tell you, I was a reborn again, 1978, and I went on the road all over the schools in Quebec. So I went to talk what Jesus did in my life, but I only mentioned certain things that happened to me and who I was with, bikers or people that were tough, but I didn't say the things that I was raped when I was young many times. At school, by bullies, they used to bring me in the car, they say, take off your clothes, do like us. You want to join the gang? Shut up, we're going to do this. Was afraid. In those days, you had to keep everything hidden and all the time, and I was trying to tell the boys at school, whatever, me too, I tried to kill myself many times. I thought I had a mental problem. And once they use you, sometimes they'll bully you, and then they'll do whatever they do with you, and then they'll get rid of you, and then they'll make you stay away from them because you become like a disease. Or and then they tell you better shut up, and then you live all your early age with inside your head, nobody there to help you, or shut up, don't say that, nobody. So the religion was very strict. Their parents were very strict. We couldn't talk about those things, what they're going to do about their reputation.
Let me ask you something, Richard.
You come 34 years old, it still affects you, you know.
I'm sure it does. Let me ask you, what do you think we need to do about this type of behavior?
Well, you have
Yours
to
was
step
obviously
up,
an extreme
what I want
case.
to tell the guy, I did to martial arts for 6 years and a half. I did step up to bullies in the past, and it did cure the problem. But it's just I took some dangerous steps, and I realized I could have got killed. But it's just what I want to say about that is that sometimes you'll go to court, you'll bring somebody and beat you up like an handicap in a wheelchair, whatever. The person can tell you, you become the victim on both sides. Then you become like, why did I step up?
Right.
And then sometimes they don't get the time, and they don't. You think they're going to be away for quite a while, and they're still in the community, and they're still abusing other people.
Right.
But it's just there's all kind of forms of people that are bullies. You could get them in their 70s. You could get them. It's serious. I'm not joking. Even in churches, some people would be surprised the way some people get talked. Priests or they hide things. You know, you see it, but you don't say nothing.
Richard, thank you very much for your call.
God
I
bless.
appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with more on Talk Ottawa. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Ottawa. We're talking tonight about bullying, and if you have a question or comment, if you want to join the discussion, give us a call right now. 613-728-1001 is the number to call. And Ruth Sirman, you were talking during the break about how one of the obstacles we have to overcome is the fact that for the people who are doing the bullying, it actually to an extent, it works for them in the social environment that they're operating in.
If I say to you, give me that chocolate bar that you've got, give it to me, and you do, I walk away going, that worked. And so what am I going to do the next time?
And it's not just about chocolate bars,
No.
it's about social standing and about power and about all of those things.
People who steal cars didn't start out stealing cars. They probably started lifting CDs out of drugstores and so on. It's a slippery slope once you get onto it. And as long as the strategy works, then unless we come up with a compelling reason and stop allowing it to work for them, why would they change it? Because it's successful.
So how do you do that?
Well, I had a whiny child, and I have a really hard time with whiny children. It's just like fingers on a chalkboard. And I just discovered that I don't speak whine. So when they would start to whine, I would just get really stupid. Hello? What? Pardon? You want to clean your room? It was anything but what they were looking for. And it took about 2 weeks. Thought I'd go crazy in the interim. But at the end of that time, they would come in, they would start to whine, and I would go, I beg your pardon? And they go, oh, can I have a cookie? And the whine would disappear. They learned to shut it off because it wasn't successful. I think we have to find strategies. And listening to Stuntman Stu about going into schools and so on, I would like to see that program expand. And Jerry, you've got a program as well, that we're actually teaching skills to kids, to teachers, to parents that allow them to find more constructive ways of working with each other. So that we're building internal capacity. We're helping them get to the point where when they get into the workplace, they're not taking that bullying attitude with them. Because I think, quite frankly, what goes on in workplaces and what goes on in schools, the primary difference is the height of the players and the price of the toys.
Now,
Other than that,
go ahead, Joanne.
You know, I would love to take that even a step further and say, not only do we as a community need to do this, but we also need to support agencies that are already doing this. I mean, there are so many organizations and groups who are working very hard in schools who don't get very much funding from or support from the community. The reality is that there are some causes that are just not attractive. Investing in a preventative cause like Jared's Vision doesn't have the show of donating to an organization feeding someone who's homeless, because you don't see that dollar for dollar impact right away. And so I think the reality is we need to look at what is already happening in our community and how can we empower those projects with our celebrity or with our experiences or with our support. And I have to say, one of the greatest things that I've noticed in the last week is that Ottawans really care, and people have emailed our organization and saying they want to offer their support and their services. But more than that, I've heard stories from youth who have gone through our programs at Jared's Vision, who are either in university or graduating this year and have been working with us for the last 3 years, saying, just so you know, we didn't kill ourselves. And it's amazing. There are some really amazing, successful programs in the city that need our support, need greater investment in terms of funding from city and foundations, and I think we need to support them.
And from the school system as well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they need to be fundamental. They can't be one-shot deals. You know, they really do need to be built in, fundamental. And we were speaking at the break about how important it is for youth to be given the skills and the opportunities to engage other youth in those discussions.
Absolutely. And those discussions really should be centered around youth, by youth, and for youth. Which is why I'm excited. I mean, Chair's Vision is a youth-run organization, and you know, it's recent graduates who go into schools, you know, recent high school graduates who go into schools, share their experiences, share their stories, and they don't just talk. They listen to other kids and their experiences, and they talk about how they can create solutions together. And then our organization goes back, gives them money, supports those initiatives, and we see real change.
So how does that work exactly? Tell me what happens in the schools. What do you do?
Well, our organization does a lot of things. We do conferences, workshops for teachers and students and parents, presentations, we give out grants, we support diversity clubs and student councils and athletic associations. And what we do is we take a very multifaceted and varying approach to every school that we work in so that we support whatever their initiatives are.
Now,
you know,
on that point, there was a lot of debate recently about the issue of gay-straight alliances in schools. There was the issue about whether Catholic schools wanted to see them there or not. Can you shed a bit of light on that issue and what role those groups can play?
Well, you know, gay straight alliances, diversity clubs, rainbow alliances, those are student-led initiatives where students are either seeking support from themselves, you know, from teachers or administration, or they're groups where students are working with their school community to make it a better place. And I think it is really shameful when, you know, a school or a community doesn't want to support their youth. You know, it's 2011, and it's sort of shocking to see that some communities just are not supportive of LGBTQ issues. I think, you know, the most shameful thing in all of the dialogues I've heard since Jay's death was that nobody is talking about this as an LGBTQ issue. You know, Jamie, you know, and I'm friends with his friends, and, you know, in the office we talk a lot about him because he was close to so many of us at Chair's Vision.
You're saying the focus has been
on bullying, when really this is homophobic bullying.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between, you know, Danny Zuko in Greece shoving someone into a locker and someone calling you a fag at lunch and someone else calling you a fag at dinner and someone else calling, you know, being afraid to come up to your parents, your teacher telling you run like a sissy, your friend graffitiing on your locker because she thinks it's funny. You know, there's a big difference between bullying and your daily grind of experiencing homophobia and transphobia. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is even within the context of this recent event, we as a society are afraid to talk about it as a gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans queer experience. And I think that's still very shameful. But it also speaks to the homophobia amongst adults and amongst the media and amongst the community we live in. And
so are you saying that the reaction to this, that many people who have been reacting to what happened with Jamie Hubley have been putting it into a broader context so that they don't have to confront that issue?
Absolutely.
That aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's amazing because we have to confront that issue. And you know, bringing it back to what we were talking about before, so many agencies are confronting that issue head on. YSB, Chair's Vision, you know, YouthNet, CHEO, but we're not supporting those issues. We're supporting, you know, stop bullying. Kids don't even use the word bullying in schools. You know, that's a word adults in media use. Kids call it drama. You know, kids call it, hey, he called me a fag. Kids call it stuff you have to deal with. And for people like me who grow up with it, I call it daily life and reality. And just because I've gotten out of school doesn't mean it's changed.
I'd love to throw something
Sure.
in, and that, just when you said that, one of the things that for me, because to me bullying in a broader sense is a huge issue, but what you're talking about in terms of the homophobic bullying is addressing who someone is at the very core of their being. And if we deny who someone is at the very core of their being, then we create massive, massive problems for that individual. And that is, it just takes it to another whole level beyond the sort of picking at each other that goes on.
Quick final word from you, Joanne.
You know, I completely agree with the other panelists, and the other guests. I think one of the things that I would say is that for those kids, one of the key things that I think has changed overall, aside from the investment at a fundamental level and with really good intentions, is the idea that, you know, there is help out there for kids who are in crisis and are not feeling great about themselves. We heard about the Kids Help phone line.
Right.
I believe you have the number for a crisis line that's floating through the screen. And we also at YSB have our walk-in clinic that's now available Tuesdays and Thursdays from noon till 8 p.m. that you don't need an appointment for.
And that's for kids who are bullying as well as those who are being bullied?
It's for mental health services that have a very broad range.
Great.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, we're out of time, but thank you to all three of you for being part of this discussion tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Talk Ottawa. Good night.